What if the strength you're proud of is just loneliness in disguise? What if your independence, the thing that kept you safe, that made you proud, is now the very thing keeping you isolated? You've spent years mastering self-sufficiency. You don't reach out first, you don't ask twice, you respond with "I'm good" even when you're unraveling. You'd rather solve a crisis alone than risk being misunderstood. At some point, that became your normal. You know how to listen without speaking. You know how to stay silent long enough for the world to call you steady. You don't need comfort. You need space. You don't want connection. You want control. But deep down, when the noise fades and the lists are done, there's something aching inside the quiet, something that doesn't feel like peace. Freedom without connection is exile with better lighting. Cages aren't always made of iron. Sometimes they're built from thoughts like, "I don't need anyone." If they cared, they'd ask, "No one stays anyway." You never said those words aloud. You didn't have to. You lived them. You say you're not lonely. You're just selective. But you can't remember the last time someone saw you and meant it, not for your usefulness, not for your strength, but for the fragile, flickering, breathing truth underneath. Carl Jung called it the persona, the mask we wear to survive in the world. But when the mask fits too well, it stops being a disguise. It becomes who you think you are. You didn't become strong because you wanted to. You became strong because no one stayed long enough for you to be anything else. You didn't stop needing. You just stopped showing it. You didn't stop hurting. You just stopped letting anyone close enough to see the wound. And over time, the mask started to smile without meaning it. The calendar stayed full, but the room felt empty. And even your victories started to echo. You go to bed tired, but not from the day, from the performance. You pretend the silence soothes you, but the truth is, it stings. And if you're still listening, maybe that truth is yours too. Maybe you've built a life so protected, so expertly curated for strength that no one can find their way in. Not because they haven't tried, but because you forgot how to open the door. The divine outcast isn't someone who was pushed out. He's someone who left first so no one else could leave him. But now even the solitude feels heavy. Even the armor feels tight. The cage is beautiful, but it's still a cage, and you weren't meant to live unseen. No child is born afraid to need. That fear grows quietly, rooted in absence, in shame, in the subtle betrayals of being emotionally unmet. Maybe it was the parent who showed up physically but never asked how you felt. Maybe it was the moment you cried and were told to stop. Maybe it was loving someone who didn't know how to love you back, so you adapted, you replaced expression with excellence. You learned to earn affection through performance. You turned "I'm fine" into a reflex. You began overthinking every message before you sent it, and somewhere along the way, being emotionally invisible felt safer than being rejected again. Carl Jung said the more we identify with our mask, the more we lose sight of the self beneath it. You didn't just build walls, you built a system. Stay competent, stay calm, stay in control, don't show need, don't show weakness, don't hope too loudly. And it worked. People trust you, they rely on you, but few actually see you, because every time someone gets close, you pull away, just slightly. You change the subject, you make them laugh, you say, "It's not a big deal," and it's convincing until you're alone. You know how to give support, but struggle to receive it without guilt. You know how to carry others, but your own weight has no home. You confuse emotional distance for maturity, you confuse being unfazed with being healed. But if you're honest, you've become a stranger to your own tenderness. In Buddhist tradition, Kisa Gotami carried her dead child from house to house, begging for a cure. The Buddha told her to bring him a mustard seed from a home untouched by loss. She found none. Only then did she realize her grief was not hers alone. It was universal, shared, human. Your grief may not be as visible, it may not have a name, but it's there. It's in the love you never received, the words you silenced, the years you spent being everything for everyone except seen. You're not the only one who learned to trade vulnerability for value. You're not the only one who made usefulness a form of protection. You're not the only one who hardened because soft places got hurt. Even ice remembers it was water once. Even the strongest exteriors ache for softness. And you're starting to feel it, aren't you? The fatigue, the sharp loneliness that follows even your best days. The way you flinch internally when someone asks how you really are. You've outgrown your armor, not because you're weaker, but because you're finally strong enough to take it off. Because real strength isn't in being untouchable. It's in being honest enough to say, I don't want to carry this alone anymore. I'm tired of hiding behind my own image. I miss being soft. You don't need to shatter, you just need to thaw. And when you do, when even a small part of you melts, you'll remember something you didn't realize you forgot, that you were never hard by nature, only by necessity. But you're safe now, safe enough to become human again. You don't wake up one morning and realize your fortress is crumbling. It starts in smaller ways. You forget to answer a text, not because you're busy, but because you can't bring yourself to reply. You tell someone you're good, but the word lands like ash. You rehearse a message you'll never send. You look in the mirror and don't recognize the person you've been trying so hard to hold together. This is how collapse begins. Not with fire, but with quiet. You've spent so long holding your world upright that the idea of being held feels foreign, unreachable, dangerous. Your rituals of control no longer bring relief. The routines you used to cling to feel like theater. You work, perform, succeed, yet something trembles just beneath the surface. A weight that has no name, a grief that no longer asks permission. Carl Jung called it the shadow, the parts of ourselves we silence because they once made us feel unsafe. And your shadow is full of things no one could ever carry for you. The ache to be seen, the longing you dismissed as weakness, the grief of never having been mirrored in your need. You're not cold, you're guarded, not unfeeling, just out of practice. You hear someone say, I miss you, and it knocks the breath out of you, because you don't know how to be missed when you've made yourself disappear. You remember someone who tried to love you. You didn't push them away because you didn't feel it. You did it because you felt it too much, because they touched a place you'd sealed shut with years of silence. That wasn't indifference, that was terror. Terror that being seen would unravel the person you fought so hard to become. But the irony is, the longer you keep the armor on, the more invisible you become. The Sufi story of Sheikh Sanan speaks to this moment. He was a man of devotion, disciplined, respected, admired, until he fell in love with someone who stripped all that away. He gave up his knowledge, his image, his pride, and tended swine, not because he lost himself, but because he met the parts of himself that his title never allowed. Sometimes it takes losing everything you built to remember what you actually are. And now you feel it. That tension in your chest that isn't stress, it's the soul knocking. You sit in a room full of people and feel a loneliness that shouldn't exist. You scroll through names and can't bring yourself to call anyone. You listen to your own voice and wonder when it got so flat. This isn't about sadness. It's about saturation. You're full of silence, of unspoken needs, of the fatigue of keeping it all together. You think breaking means failure. But some things don't break to fall apart. They break to let the truth come out. You didn't build the fortress to trap yourself. You built it to stay safe. But now, it's starting to feel more like a tomb than a shelter. And the question is no longer, can I keep it up? The question is, what would happen if I let it fall? There's a sound the soul makes when you finally stop pretending. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, it's the sound of a breath you didn't realize you were holding, finally released. You sit in the stillness and let the silence speak. And for the first time, you don't run from what it says. This isn't a breakdown, it's a breaking open. The difference is everything. Carl Jung called it the night sea journey. The ego dissolves, the mask disintegrates, and the truth that was buried in shame rises to the surface. This is the place where your strength is no longer defined by how well you hide. This is where you meet the self you locked away, the one who used to cry without apology, the one who reached out instinctively, the one who believed connection wasn't dangerous. That self has been waiting, not to be saved, but to be invited back in. You don't collapse, you uncurl, you don't fall apart, you fall into place. The tears don't come like weakness, they come like ceremony. They don't say, I'm broken, they say, I'm real. This is where the lies lose their grip. The lie that needing someone makes you weak. The lie that being soft makes you unsafe. The lie that your value is in how little you ask for. David Benner said, only surrender is strong enough to free us from the prison of our egocentricity. And now you know that surrender isn't giving up. It's giving in to truth, to feeling, to the parts of you that stop breathing under all that armor. Your anima, the soul self, the forgotten feminine within you, returns, not with fanfare, but with presence. She doesn't accuse you for the silence. She whispers, you don't have to fight anymore. You're allowed to feel this, all of it, and you do. You let the sob catch in your throat and release it. You let the softness move through you like sunlight through a cracked window. You feel the tremble, the warmth, the undoing, and nothing in you says, stop. Because now you understand you weren't undone by emotion. You were undone by the years you spent pretending you didn't have any. You weren't ruined by need. You were exhausted by the effort of denying it. You weren't fragile for wanting to be seen. You were human, and finally, you let yourself be. This is not a moment of defeat. This is sacred return. And if this moment feels like yours, stay. Don't turn away. You are closer than you think. Because when the mask dissolves and the armor melts, what remains isn't weakness. It's the kind of strength the world doesn't always understand, but your soul always did. There's a moment after surrender that feels almost suspicious. You're not sure if it's peace or just the absence of panic. You sit with yourself and realize nothing's demanding you fix it. No image to uphold, no script to perform, just breath, just presence. It's disorienting, this sudden quiet, like stepping outside after years underground. The light doesn't hurt, it confuses you. You don't recognize the version of you that doesn't have to be perfect to be accepted. You don't quite trust the relief, but you're starting to believe in it. You're still you. But something essential has shifted. You no longer flinch at the thought of being seen. You're no longer addicted to the idea that love has to be earned through pain. You're not scared of softness the way you once were. The people who used to feel distant suddenly seem closer, not because they changed, but because you've stopped hiding. You say things without apologizing for them. You let your voice shake and don't correct it. You laugh in a way that isn't edited for safety. And when someone says, I'm here, you don't instinctively ask yourself what it will cost you. This is healing, not a dramatic rebirth, but a slow, beautiful remembering. The remembering that strength doesn't mean isolation, it means wholeness. It means you can be powerful and still reach for someone's hand. There's an old story from the Plains tribes, a mouse who longs for something more. He journeys far from home, giving pieces of himself to those in need, his eyes, his energy, his safety. He gives until he's blind, alone. But at the final moment, when everything is gone, he is lifted and transformed into an eagle. Not because he fought harder, but because he surrendered fully. You are becoming that eagle now. Your sight is no longer just sharp, it's honest. You see where your walls stood. You see the ways you made yourself small to avoid pain. You see the people you kept at a distance, not because they were unsafe, but because you didn't yet believe you were safe to be loved. And in that seeing, something new opens. You start to show up differently. You offer your presence instead of your performance. You begin conversations that don't orbit around control. You let someone love you, not for what you solve, but for what you feel. And when the old reflex returns, to run, to detach, to turn quiet when things get real, you pause, you breathe, you stay. Because now you know leaving doesn't protect you, it isolates you. And being untouched isn't the goal, being held is. You don't need everyone to understand you, just a few who see you, the real you, the unarmored you. The one who tried to earn connection through silence, but finally realized that the door was never locked. You just had to stop pretending you didn't want to open it. You are not what happened to you. You are what you chose to become after. And this version of he doesn't just endure, he soars. You return differently than you left. You don't come back to the world with grand gestures or loud declarations. You come back quietly, gently, not to be recognized, but to finally recognize yourself. The divine outcast was never cast out by force. He walked away first, because needing felt like risk, because silence felt like armor, because the world didn't seem to have a place for his truth. But now you know. You weren't too much, you were too compressed, too refined, too edited by expectation. Now you walk back not as the version of yourself they clapped for, but as the one you kept hidden, the one that breathes slower, the one that laughs softer, the one that doesn't need to be impressive to belong. Ubuntu teaches a person is a person through other persons. You understand now your edges were never the problem, your disconnection was. Carl Jung wrote that individuation is not perfection, it's integration, the merging of shadow and soul, persona and presence, isolation and intimacy. You are that integration now. You don't shrink when you feel too deeply. You don't dismiss the tremble in your voice. You don't apologize for needing. You just show up fully, freely, finally. And the people you feared would reject the real you? Some did, but others leaned in. And the ones who stayed, they saw what the world missed. Not the polished surface, but the heart behind the silence. You return with no mask, no performance, just the honest weight of your story. You are not healed in a straight line, but you are no longer hiding in a circle. You say things now like, I miss you, I'm struggling, I'm grateful, I don't know what I'm doing, but I want to do it honestly. And in saying them, you teach others that their own return is possible too, because you've become something rare, a bridge, a mirror, a permission slip. And if you've made it this far, maybe you're ready too, to stop being the one who disappears when things get heavy, to stop earning affection through silence, to stop confusing strength with suffering. In the evening of life, said St. John of the Cross, we will be judged on love alone. Not how well you performed it, but how honestly you received it, how bravely you gave it back. You spent years trying not to need anyone. But what if needing was never the weakness? What if it was the doorway? If this story felt like yours, maybe it's because it always was. And maybe it's time to write the next chapter. Send this to the one who's still carrying everything alone, to the one who doesn't know how to say, I'm tired, to the one who's been silent for so long, they forgot what their voice even sounds like. Tell them, you're not alone. You never were, and it's safe to come home now. Because the divine outcast has returned, not to impress, not to conquer, but to finally be seen and to stay.